Bonus footage.
Yeah, so Ramon and I will be discussing
He'll be chiming in occasionally.
15 minutes.
car market inflation with imports and kind of like the current crop of popular cars, and then our thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, because you assholes had one job and you fucked it up.
Pretty much. Basically what's happening right now with everyone complaining, oh, 240s are getting expensive, Supras are getting expensive, like all the golden era JDM cars are getting expensive.
USDM and Euro cars as well.
Yeah, pretty much everything from like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s prices are starting to creep up. And it's basically everyone's making the same mistakes that like our boomer forefathers with the muscle cars of the muscle car heyday of like the 60s and the 70s are doing, where they're putting even 50s cars. Well, pretty much anything pre 1970.
75, really?
Yeah, like anything like pre 75, especially in California, where small cutoff of 75 is getting it's expensive and shit. What happened is all those fuckers put a premium on their childhood memories, and they're like, my childhood was the fucking tits because I drove a 454 and I'm a white dude that lives in America. So they're going to charge out the ass for it, and because other people are thinking the same thing, they're willing to pay for it. And that's what happened, and that's why there's freaking 7-figure muscle cars rolling through like Barrett-Jackson and Meckham and at like the Pebble Beach auctions like in the summer. And now that same thing is starting to happen with imports, because a lot of these guys that, like guys and gals that grew up during the import explosion in the U.S. during like the late 90s, early 2000s, they're now becoming of age where they're working really good jobs and they're making good money, and they want to buy these cars that they drove in their youth to recapture like that feeling. Which there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel youthful. It's just a shame when you price out the only affordable, like fun to drive sports cars once they get priced out of the market, literally just to do with like greed and market demand.
Yep.
And like that's a shame. And it wouldn't be as much of a problem if there were more cars being built by manufacturers, but there's not really any more affordable sports cars. Even like the BRZ, the Miata, and like those kind of cars. It's still a new car, and you have to pay new car money, and not everyone can go into a dealer and drop like $6,000 for a down payment and then make payments. Like that's not realistic for everyone, especially like young kids like just out of high school and shit. And yeah, that's the reason why cars, like people complain about like the car scene dying and stuff. It's not because of lack of interest. It's just no one can get fucking into it.
Yep.
It's expensive, like we all know that, but it doesn't have to be that expensive. It doesn't have to be, $5,000 for a rolling 240 shell. Yeah.
Because for a while there was a point in time where you could pick up an FB, SA, or FC for like under $1,000 for like a barely running one. Mind you, it was still running for like under $1,000. Now you're not touching a shell for that much, and that's fucking stupid because they did build so many more 90s, what you guys would call 90s and 80s golden era cars. Even the commuter cars like the 8.6.
Yeah.
They got turned into like sports cars. They still built so many more of those fucking things than they did like muscle cars or like even like the 70s and 60s luxury cars. There was a smaller amount of those which sort of justified the price leap, and even then those cars didn't jump up until prices to like the late 90s, early 2000s. So they went from the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. They enjoyed about 20 to 30 years of like chill prices before they slowly started climbing to like the mid 2010s, where you first saw like $1 million like
Excuse me.
Mustangs, Camaros, and Corvettes. Before that shit was
the
like,
shot game?
are we?
Yeah.
No, that's a separate video.
No,
Separate
okay.
video. Like the
Well, that's
only
the other one
cars,
if you don't-
yeah, only cars at that point in time like worth $1 million, like Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bugattis, Rolls Royces. American cars didn't start selling for that much money till like closer to 2010. So that's a good 30 to 40, 50
Even
years.
through the early 2000s, there was like...
But they were super rare option cars.
Yeah, that's true.
The price
the more
jump-
popular models
Yeah.
were still like...
But like the price jumps we've seen in like Japanese cars where it's like, all right, your base ass 350Z that's a non-Brembo option, it's not even a fucking enthusiast. It's like the base of the base, not even a track edition, because even the track edition will get you some money. But like a Grand Touring 350Z will like, guys are asking like $7-8 for that. Your car isn't worth that because they built a shit ton more, and it's like the lowest denomination of the model. Just because you see some guy selling his, 350Z track or an anniversary edition for like 15 grand and getting it, doesn't mean, hey, maybe if I price it like 5 to like 6 grand under it, I can get close. Like, it's not even that much. Shit doesn't work that way.
I can tell you something right now. If this mic could even fucking pick me up. Alright, perfect. So, honestly, with what you guys are saying, the whole COVID situation that's come about recently, that's played a major role in it too. If you think about it, there's more people stuck at home that are bored looking at cars. There's more people with their, their stimmy money, their stimulus checks and all that stuff. I don't know. I knew that there was going to be inflation in general, and I saw it beforehand, but it took a big jump after the whole COVID situation, or during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but the trend was already there. Like, it was already on an upward trend.
Yeah,
it wasn't like a sudden spike, so I wouldn't...
I
COVID
mean,
plays a factor, but it's not like a...
Maybe with certain cars, because like there were still certain cars that were not, like FCs were still like 2, 3, 4 grand, whatever. Like, just for reference, the fucking FC that I have right now has a $13,000 standing offer before the rebuild. That's ridiculous as hell. Yeah, let's be honest. That car is not worth that much. But it still has that offer. It's like,
I mean, none of these cars are actually worth that much.
No.
Yeah, in reality, no.
Because for some reason people forgot what like Kelly Blue Book is and like the Nanda Guide is.
Yeah.
And I've noticed like the recent times that I've bought vehicles, people stopped haggling. Yep. Why the fuck would you like do that? Like, I haggled for this Blazer, and the guy was like surprised. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna pay what the fuck you're asking for. Like, it's a used car. Like, there's shit that needs to be done with it. Let's,
I mean, it's
work
just
a deal out here.
It's just people are putting a premium on their stuff that's not exactly like warranted.
Really.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Example: I sold the YZ for like $6,200, and it was one of the stockest Z's I've owned. Blue shit box, the blue one, had like fresh bushings, adjustable everything, a cage, all the bolt-ons minus an ECU, and like I barely got $4 grand out of that.
I mean, then again, there's also like stock cars tend to retain their value, and it's twofold. It's because, for one, there's buyers that just want a stock car to enjoy it. They don't want to deal with all of like what they would consider to be like kid stuff or modifications and shit. They just want a stock car to enjoy, so they'll pay a premium for that. And then there's the people that they do want to build it, but they prefer to start with a clean base, so they don't have to undo anything the previous owner did. And nothing to say against like your mechanical ability. I know that when you build a car, you build it right the first time, but there's a lot of people that don't, and that's just that's a fear that you have to consider when you're buying a used modified car.
But like, in a sense, like, wouldn't you want to, like, all right, I'm saving some money here. Look, it already has this. If they're sick, if they're solid, all right.
I mean, it does.
But I also feel like when I look over cars, like, I go like way extra than like your average buyer would.
No, so. You do. It's just everyone has a fucking ego, and they want to they don't want to buy a pre-built car. They want to buy a car and then put their spin on it, so it becomes their car and all that kind of thing. Which I get it, but. And undoing like shoddy modifications is annoying. Like on the Integra, one of the previous owners tried to do a short shifter by chopping the shifter in half below the threads, and then they hollowed out a flashlight and just secured it on there with duct tape. Yeah, it's always fun when you go to swap out your shift knob, then you realize now you have to buy a shifter. That's always fun.
Yeah, that sucks. But like an example, I think that he brought up too. Like, R32 wheels are like almost $1,000 for these fucking wheels.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm not even gonna go for like when we were fresh out of high school, you could get a full set of R32 wheels for like $200.
Yeah, and not even like the GTR wheels too that are like 16x8.
Yeah.
They're actually like.
Well, if we're being honest here,
it was like $200, and now it's like $1,000 fucking dollars.
The whole market,
these are mass-produced wheels. Like, how are you gonna ask that much?
The whole market in general, what I noticed is like with the R32 and whatnot, when that first was available here in the States, like 12, 13 grand or whatever. How much are they asking now?
7 to 8.
Less? That was less than that, but I'm saying now they're asking like 30, 40 grand.
More than that.
More than that, like for an R32. You know, it's like.
I mean, that's just more of a
that's also because they're starting to
issue.
run out of those. So that it could somewhat be acceptable. But at the same time, a lot of these cars that are being brought over, like, they're not high-grade cars because, you know,
Yeah.
the Japanese guys go by, like, auction numbers. So, like, the first couple, like, 8 to, like, under 10K R32s were pretty solid cars. And now we're, like, paying close to $30,000 to $40,000 for, like, not even R32, like, any Japanese car in general, like, even JZXs are, like, shooting up in price. And that's, like, a JZX in Japan is like a fucking Accord and Camry here. They're fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
We're paying $30,000 to $40,000 for those cars. So, like...
I mean, that's kind of like dealer gouging.
Yeah,
that's like dealer gouging
it's also
too,
dealer
with the
gouging,
more,
too.
With the more, like, popular cars. I agree with what you said with, like, the special editions. Yeah, the supply is drying up, and that kind of explains stuff over here as well. Like, there's just not as many clean, like, there's not as many clean, like, 240s and
Not
Civics
finding
and that
cars
kind of
is equal to wheels automatically. Fucking
Yeah,
go
that's
to the
true.
moon.
That's true.
Like, even fucking engine prices are...
Yeah.
People,
The-
like, selling
the-
JZs for, like, almost 10 Gs. Are you guys, like, mental? You can buy a whole crate engine for, like, way less.
The Honda People's Motor or whatever, the B20 that used to be $400, like 6-something, 700 now. That's a small increase, but it's still a motor out of a CRV for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Or S2K engines. For a while, S2Ks were fucking worthless.
Yeah.
And then they became
But, I mean, I
popular
can see
and everything
that.
shot up.
But that's still, you can see that, I don't know.
It was
But,
a,
I mean,
was a slight...
S2000s kind of have... It's not the entire demographic, but they sort of have Corvette syndrome, where they get bought by like older dudes that hardly ever drive them,
Yeah.
and then but because the market's also getting screwed up, they can now like charge out the ass. Whereas with Corvettes, it's like, well, every Corvette on the market is like low mileage, barely driven, always garage.
Yeah.
So that's why like Corvette prices, other than
C4s.
I guess like C7s were having an issue recently because like the C8s came out and that somehow brought up the price of C7s. But that's a whole other thing.
Although I will say, like, if you're a car, like, collector that's for some dumb reason watching this, the C7 will become the new C2 because it had a super short production run. So, if you could pick up a C7 for dirt cheap, do it now. Because later on, it's going to be a cash cow.
It's also the last front engine Corvette, so that's just going to be a. Even though the Corvette's been front engine since fucking forever, that's still
C2,
just going to be the
C3.
fucking. That's going to be the thing to slap on the auction.
It's the last front. It's the last front midship transaxle Corvette.
Last front engine Corvette. I
Fuck,
know
sound
what I
like a
have.
boomer.
No low ballers.
Not wrong.
Honestly, some of these ads, like I saw one, dude, that guy that wanted to trade me this fucking EG. How he just said it, that's how I read most of your guys' fucking dumb ads. I know what I have.
Yeah, if you're posting your car for sale, just
That was
say,
literally you when you were trying to sell the Z. I'm not taking anything less than $5,000. Bitch, for what? It's a hunk of shit.
You couldn't build that car for that much, though.
It doesn't fucking matter. This
All right,
is
all
a
right.
piece of
When
shit.
you're posting
Go on,
a car, when you're posting a car for sale, put what kind of car it is, put the mileage, put what's good about it, what's bad about it, and how much you want in or best offer or trade. That's it. We don't need your fucking backstory. I don't care about how you need to pay for your dog's colonoscopy.
Whoa.
I just want to buy your fucking car.
Like this guy that I saw selling this really like saucy ass E36 convertible, and I was like, oh, like it said open for trades, but DM for info, and I was like, the fuck do I have to DM you for?
Was
Yeah.
like the whole like car. And
Dude,
then-
like, the car looks nice-ish.
Daytime.
And then he was like, oh yeah, so I'm asking like $4,000, but like it also really overheats, but I'm too lazy to like, bleed
Yeah.
it. And that's all the time we have left. Bye-bye.
That was the weakest